This is All India Radio, Power of Listening. Under this series, tonight we take you on a journey to the world of yet another magnificent facet of the traditional Indian knowledge systems, Legacy of Agamas. In today's episode, we shall be discussing on the Agamas, the ancient Indian texts which described cosmology, philosophical doctrines, precepts on meditation and practices, temple construction, deity worship, and ways to attain sixfold desires. The experts in this discussion are Dr. G. Shankar Narayanan, HOD in the Department of Sanskrit, Shri Chandrasekharendra Saraswathi Viswa Mahavidyalaya, Enathur, Kanchipuram; Dr. K.Ganesan, Professor of Indology in the prestigious French Institute, Puducherry. The moderator of this discussion is Dr. M.A. Venkatakrishnan, retired HOD, Department of Vaishnavism, University of Madras. Stay tuned.
Agamas are the great treasure bestowed on us by our ancient law, which speak about philosophy, epistemology, yoga, charya, and also about temple activities, right from the consecration of the temple, daily puja, and then renovation of the temples, again reconsecration, that is kumbhabhishekam or samprokshanam, whatever we call. So all these principles are only governed by these agamas. And the word agama itself means that which has come to us. Come to us from whom? It has come to us directly from the Lord Himself. The agamas themselves say. So, agamas are the texts which are given to us by the Lord Himself according to the agamas themselves. Actually, the agama tradition is not restricted to one part of our country. Actually, agama tradition was prevailing pan-India, throughout India. For example, one Sri Vaishnava Acharya known as Yamunacharya. Yamunacharya lived during 10th century. That is, he is the grand teacher of Ramanuja, great teacher of Ramanuja. And he has written a work called Agama Pramanya, the authority of Agamas. In that Agama Pramanya, he refers to another text known as Agama Pramanya, hailed from Kashmir. That is, Kashmira Agama Pramanya Ayam Darshitam. This particular thing is already told in Kashmir Agama Pramanya, he says. So, these Agamas were prevalent from Kashmir to Kanyakumari. So, it is prevalent throughout the country and it is not restricted to the temple alone. So, can you say something about the Agamas which were also available in other parts of country? I would like to request Dr. Ganesan to explain about.
As you said, the Shaiva Agamas were also present in Kashmir and many acharyas were there and it was widespread throughout the country. Just as in the same way, even sometime during Yamunacharya, still earlier, Ramakantha is a very, very great Shaiva Acharya in Kashmir. He has written a text called Sarva Agama Pramanya. So, he has established the Agamas are also equally valid and equally to Veda. And he established all the Agamas, not only Shaiva Agamas, Sarva Agama Pramanya, and it is quoted in other later Vyakhyanas. And then we have the Golaki and Amardaka, two great Shaiva Mathas, mostly from the central India, in the bank of Narmada, and we have lot of inscriptions. Their acharyas have spread from to Gujarat in the west, east to Bengal, south Andhra and Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. So through them the Shaiva Siddhanta Agamas and Mathas were established. Shaiva Siddhanta Agamas were propagated, studied, commented, and in this way kings, many royal dynasties supported, they became their students. These acharyas became the Rajaguru of those royal dynasties, including Rajaraja and others. We have lot of inscriptions. So the Shaiva Agamas were throughout the country prevalent. The Shaiva Siddhanta, not only Shaiva Siddhanta, still earlier the Lakula Agamas. So the Lakulisha, the Pashupata tradition was also widely prevalent, for which also there are a lot of inscriptions. Not only in this greater India, that is called Southeast Asia also, we have many evidences that Shaiva Agamas were spread. And in some inscriptions in the Cambodia, we have the Tumburu and Vinashika Tantra are mentioned in the inscriptions of the 9th, 10th century. So Agamas, Shaiva Agamas were throughout the country prevalent and they contain everything.
Actually, there are innumerable number of Agamas. Particularly, there are three types of Agamas we can say, that the Vaishnava Agamas, Shaiva Agamas and Shakta Agamas. All the three Agamas speak about all the factors which I have mentioned. Among the Vaishnava Agamas, we have called two branches, namely Vaikanasa and Pancharatra. These two agamas belong to two different schools of thought, and several temples in South India are governed by these two agamas. Some temples are following only Pancharatra agama and some temples are following only Vaikhanasa agama. In the same way, Shiva temples, most of them are governed only by Shaiva agamas. I don't think there are any difference of schools in Shaiva agamas, but anyhow, we have to discuss all those things. Now, I want to ask Dr. Shankar Narayanan to throw some light on the Vaishnava Agamas, namely Pancharatra and Vaikhanasa.
Actually, there are two divisions in the Vaishnava Agamas, namely Pancharatra and Vaikhanasa, and there are so many Samhitas attributed to Pancharatra and Vaikhanasa Agamas, namely Jayakhya Samhita, Ishvara Samhita, Padma Samhita, etc. to the Pancharatra Agama, whereas Marichi Samhita, Trisamhita and Kilhadikara, Prakirinadhikara, etc. to the Vaikhanasa Agamas. And Vishnu temples are mostly following either Pancharatra Agama or Vaikhanasa Agama, particularly in Tamil Nadu and the adjacent states too. Actually, we can identify the Agama followed in a particular temple by the worship as well as the temple architecture prescribed in the Agamas. If we take a temple, for example, the Vaikuntha Perumal temple in Kanchipuram or the Sundarvarada Perumal temple in Uttaramerur, by the architecture itself we can identify the Agama that is followed in the temple is Vaikhanasa, since the Navamurti Sthapana Vidhi is prescribed in Vaikhanasa Agamas, Marichi Samhita. So, based on the architecture itself we can identify the Agamas, and there are very few instances where the name of the Agama is inscribed in the inscriptions, particularly in Ulagalandan temple in Kanchipuram. The inscription of Kulutunga 1 clearly says that Pancharatra Shastra Padi Pujai Shaiduvaram Veda Brahmananak. So it is prescribed in the inscription itself. The Agama prescribed for that particular temple is Pancharatra. So we have two types of Agamas in Vaishnavism, that is Pancharatra and Vaikhanasa. There is a different thought between the two Agamas, namely Pancharatra and Vaikhanasa. So if we go to the basic principles of Agamas, there are so many differences between the two Agamas, and the expert in Pancharatra Agama cannot do worship in the temple which follows Vaikhanasa Agama. Yes. No such differences is available in Shaivism, whereas Vaishnavism has this type of difference between these two Agamas, and still we are following the same pattern even today. So these are the basic differences between the Pancharatra and Vaikhanasa Agamas, and based on the architecture, based on the daily worship, based on other factors, we can identify which Agama is followed in particular temple.
Yes, as you said, even in Sthala Puranas of respective temples, we find whether this temple is consecrated according to Vaikhanasa Agama or Pancharatra Agama. For example, I belong to Tiruvallikeni, that is Triplicane in Chennai. The Sthala Purana of Triplicane temple specifically says that Vaikhanasa Vidina Pradishtam Kurvan, that Vyasa himself consecrated this deity according to Vaikhanasa Agama. It has been clearly stated in Sthala Purana. In the same way, in other temples, in Pancharatra temples also, we have got that kind of references. But still I want to know what is the major difference of Vaikhanasa Agama and Pancharatra Agama. They say that Pancharatra Agama is giving importance to the tantras, that is the mudra, hasta mudras, yes, and gesticulation, yes, by hand and other things. And Vaikhanasa Agama gives very much importance to the mantras. Pancharatra Agama gives importance to tantras, whereas Vaikhanasa Agama gives importance to mantras. Can you throw light on this?
Actually, there are so many mantras prescribed in Pancharatra Tantra too. In Pancharatra Samhitas, there are so many mantras and mudras are prescribed. But in Vaikhanasa Agama, only mantras are thrown light, and mantras are given importance in Vaikhanasa Agama. This is considered to be one of the difference between the Pancharatra Tantra and the Vaikhanasa Agamas, etc. And apart from this, we can have the iconographical differences between Pancharatra and Vaikhanasa Agamas. Whereas in Pancharatra, there are three types of Lakshmis are prescribed in Pancharatra Tantra, like Yoga Lakshmi, Bhoga Lakshmi and Veera Lakshmi. Whereas 8 types of Lakshmis are prescribed in Vaikhanasa Agama, like Yoga Lakshmi, Bhoga Lakshmi, Veera Lakshmi, Goda Lakshmi, etc., etc., Paka Lakshmi, etc. 8 types of Lakshmis are prescribed in Vaikhanasa Agama. So iconographically there are so many differences, and even in mudras and mantras we have differences in both the tantras. And mostly Pancharatra is followed by the Visishtadvaitins, and the mostly Pancharatra quotations are there in Visishtadvaita's Granthas. The Granthas followed in Visishtadvaita's Siddhanta, and Vaikhanasa Agama is mostly not quoted in the doctrine of Visishtadvaita. That is a major difference between Pancharatra and Vaikhanasa Agamas.
In Vaishnava school, we have found that there are two schools of thought, namely Pancharatra and Vaikhanasa. And as Mr. Shankar Narayanan told me that even an expert in Pancharatra Agama cannot do puja in Vaikhanasa temple and vice versa. Is there any kind of such followings, such a treatise in Shaiva Agamas also? Do we have any different schools in Shaiva Agama? And is there any restrictions like that? I would like to request Dr. Ganesan to explain about.
Shaiva Agamas, as we have now, they are the Shaiva Siddhanta tradition. But in the old times, there are four major divisions of Shaivism: Pashupata, Lakula, Soma, and Shaiva Siddhanta. Though other systems were not so popular, Pashupata system was very widely popular from throughout the country. In fact, nearly 1500 years before, actually we can say in the beginning part of the first millennium. Then we have the Shaiva Siddhanta tradition, which was again very much popular from Kashmir and throughout the country, from Kashmir, Bengal, South India and western part of India. In the Pashupata tradition, there is Nakulisha is the earliest Acharya, of whom we find his sculptures, his statues in many Shiva temples in our country, in Tamil Nadu also, and Orissa and the other parts of India. Then the Shaiva Siddhanta tradition became consolidated from the roughly we can say 7th or 8th century, because we have the inscription in the Kanchipuram temple of Kailasanatha temple. Narasimhavarma tells Shaiva Siddhanta Vetta, Agama Pramanaha, Kshunnari Vargaha, all these his titles. So these mean that in the 7th, 8th century, South India, Shaiva Agamas were very much prevalent and followed, where Diksha was very important, and whoever wants to practice Shaivism, Shaiva Siddhanta tradition, they have to undergo the Diksha. And Agamas always do not only contain the above temple. Agama contain the Shaiva Siddhanta Agamas especially. They have Parartha and Atmartha. So the Atmartha contains all the rituals from getting up from bed, Shainothana, and taking bath, everything ritually, then doing the Shiva Puja, etc. Then studying the Agama, etc. That is one part. The other part is construction of temple and doing worship in the temple. There it is Karshanadi Pratishtantam, Pratishtadi Utsavantam, Utsavadi Prayashchittantam. So from the beginning, how to construct a temple, a new one has to plow the surface and remove the other pebbles, etc., make the ground smooth. That is Karshana. From then the installation of the first slab, then the construction according to the prescription prescribed in the Agamas are done. So the way the temple is constructed, then the consecration. Say that is the Pratishtha of the Shivalinga along with the Parivara and others, Ashta Parivara and Pancha Parivara and Koshta Devatas, etc. Then we also have there is also the Shaiva Siddhanta, there is the Shakti, very important one, Yoga Shakti, Bhoga Shakti, Veera Shakti. So this is the Shaiva Siddhanta tradition is a agamic tantric tradition where mantra, mudra, mandala are play a very important role. For Diksha and for the Pratishtha also, mandalas are very much important, and there are various mandalas are described in the Shaiva Agamas. Shaiva Siddhanta Agama, as it is now prevalent, are contain 28 Moola Agamas. They are called 28. Ashta Vimshati Shaiva Agamaha. Then there are Upagamas, more than 100 Upagamas attached to each one of them. So all these 28 is a constant figure where there is no variation. And anybody who takes initiation only is eligible to practice Shaiva Siddhanta rituals both at home and as well as in the temple. Especially to do the worship in the temple and Pratishtha, Utsava, etc., one has to have the topmost Diksha, namely Shadadva Diksha, then the Acharya Abhisheka. So only he who is qualified to consecrate the temple and do worship in the temple.
Yes, you said there are about 28 Agamas. Do you mean to say that there are 28 Agama texts or 28 Agama schools? That is, what I am asking is, if you say that 28 Agamas, then if a temple is consecrated on one particular Agama, then the other man who has not studied that Agama cannot do puja in the temple. So that if you say that, then it becomes two schools. But if you say 28 Agamas, you mean to say that there are 28 Agama texts. But mostly all the Agama texts are common for all the temples.
There are 28 Moola Agama texts. They are called Samhitas, and most of the Agamas, especially Kamikam is the first Agama, Kamikadi Vatulantam is the counting. So Vatula is the last Agama. 28 Agama texts. Most of the Agamas, as we do have now, contain the Tantra Patala at the first chapter, where how the 28 Agamas were revealed by Shiva and his other forms, Shiva, Shrikantha, etc., to various gods. That is, there are 4, sometimes even 5 Ayati Krama. First, they are revealed to gods. Shrikantha reveals to Ananta, Vishnu, and other gods, Vayu, etc., Brahma, Prajapati, etc. From them it is revealed to various sages. Then the sages reveal to the human beings. So this is the four different stages. So initially they supposed to contain crores of verses, so many number of verses which human beings cannot understand now. So now as we have now, or they are mostly 4,000 verses, 3,000 verses, and there are some of the agamas are named according to the number of samhitas. And to answer your question, a particular temple is traditionally supposed to follow Kamika, Karana, and Swayambhuva agamas, and that is the tradition. And with the agamas, generally it is not easy job to do the rituals as described in the agamas. So naturally there are many acharyas, even beginning from the 9th, 10th centuries, many acharyas, they have written ritual manuals. They are called paddhatis, both for the private atmartha practice and as well as temple worship. So that is mostly followed, but that paddhati, the ritual is mostly based on that particular agama.
So in Shaiva Siddhanta they don't have, that is the different schools of agamas. But in Vaishnava Siddhanta there are two different schools, namely Pancharatra and Vaikhanasa. That is, a person who has well-versed, that is studied several years to learn Pancharatra agama, can go and do puja only in Pancharatra agama temple. He cannot even enter into the sanctum sanctorum of the Vaikhanasa temple. In the same way, a Vaikhanasa person cannot enter into the sanctum sanctorum of Pancharatra temple. So these are the two different, not two different agamas, but two different agama schools. That is the difference, I think. Am I correct, Dr.
Yes, sir.
Shankar Narayana?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. These are the different schools of Vaishnavism, and we cannot find difference in the Karanagama or Kamikagama. If one person is expert in Kamikagama, he can do Kumbhabhishekam or anything according where Karanagama is followed. But that difference is not available here in the Shaivism. But in Vaishnavism, the difference is there.
Not only that, I understand correct. See, in certain temples, one particular agama text is followed. For example, you take a Vaishnava temple known as Srirangam. In Srirangam, the agama text followed. The Pancharatra agama is followed. Particularly in Pancharatra agama, Parameshwara Samhita is followed in Srirangam temple. Whereas in Tirunarayanapuram, in Karnataka, Melkot, they follow some different agama text, though that also belongs to Pancharatra agama, but the person who is doing puja belongs to another Samhita. So that man who is doing puja in Melkot temple cannot go to Srirangam temple and do puja. And people who are doing puja in Srirangam cannot do puja in Kanchipuram. Yes. Because Kanchipuram is following Jayaki Samhita. So even on the basis of Samhita, there are several differences. Whether these things are also explained in those agamas?
Actually, according to the agamas, the particular Samhita should be followed in each and every temple. There is a list of Samhitas are prescribed for each and every temple. Like for Yadavadri, Venkatadri, etc., etc. A list is there, and particular Samhita is to be followed in a particular temple. So according to that prescription, we are doing pujas and other renovations there in temples.
See, I want to know another thing also. Whether the agamas are available only in Sanskrit language or agamas are also available in other languages, any other languages, Dr. Ganesan?
Yes. With regard to Shaiva tradition, all the agamas are only in Sanskrit language, Sanskrit language. But there were efforts in the olden times to give the essence of the agamas so that people who did not know Sanskrit, they also knew what it is. But originally the agamas were revealed as we have is in Sanskrit language.
That is, you mean to say that the original texts are in Sanskrit, only a treatise is available in other languages.
Yeah, other languages.
Only the philosophical part of the Shaiva agamas are translated into Tamil, like Unmai Narivilakam, etc., etc. Yes. And the temple worship and other rituals are not translated into Tamil.
Yes.
Only the philosophical part is translated.
Only philosophy.
Yes.
Because see, agamas consist of not only temple activities, that is the consecration, doing puja, that is Samprokshanam, Kumbhabhishekam and other things. It also consists of so many other things like that is what we say, philosophy, epistemology, charya and other things. But I am afraid that nowadays the agamas are very much restricted to temple activities only. Though agama passages are quoted in the philosophical text also, nowadays no philosopher is studying agama text. Only persons who are interested in doing service in the temple are learning the agamas. In fact, even in Brahma Sutra of Vedavyasa, we have one particular chapter known as Pancharatra Adhikarana, where he discusses about some points given in Pancharatra text. So, though there are difference of interpretation between Ramanuja and Shankara on that particular Adhikarana, the Pancharatra text has been quoted and discussed threadbare there. So, even in Brahma Sutra, we find statements about Agama scriptures. But till nowadays, Agamas are only restricted to temple activities and not for other activities. Why is it so?
Even in Satyadhikarana, Shaiva Agamas are quoted and those were refuted by Shankar Bhagavad-pada, etc. Yes. So, Agamas are dated to at least by 5th BC, and proper dating should be done by the Agamic experts. Actually, there are two schools of researching. One school is done by the Agamic researchers or the traditional researchers, and the other school by modern researchers who are following the secondary sources. I think the traditional scholars should do the research for dating the Agamas to say that these are not interpolations or these are not the inserted text, but these are the original text. I remember in the prelude of Jayakya Samhita of Pancharatra, the editor dated the text to 2nd or 3rd based on the symbols prescribed in the Agamas and comparing them with the Brahmi lectures. Such type of research should be done to date the Agamas and to say that these are the basic manuals for the temples, and these are not interpolated text or these are not the inserted text. So the traditional scholars should come forward to do the research on the dating of the Agamas. We have our own beliefs that these were revealed by the God himself, etc., etc. But for the modern researchers and the protesters, they need the date of the Agamas. They are pushing the date beyond their level, and they are saying that these were inserted or forcibly adopted into the temples during the medieval period.
See, because now the Agamas are only restricted to the temple activities alone, the tradition of Agama has faded slowly and slowly, and it is almost forgotten. Now we have to think, that is, discover the ways how to revive it, because the Agama not only talks about the temples but also about the structures, construction, the basic material with construction is being done, and what are the things to see, how to plan, how to have foundation, how to have base, and all these things. See, even now in the modern days, if you want to build a very big that is building, we have to go for so many things, but all those things are very much found in the Agamas. See, on the basis of Agamas, there were several temples built in India that stand even after 1,000 years. So even now, very recently we were talking about the Tanjore temple built by Rajaraja Cholan. That is very much in the current topic now. They said that very big temple, but the foundation was laid only for 5 feet in the underground. See, the 5 feet underground foundation is bearing the entire temple, and this is built on the basis of Agama information. And so we have got a lot of treasures in the Agamas. In that case, Agamas should be studied by everybody, not only the persons who are interested in temple activities. So you can suggest some ways and means how to, that is, promote the Agamas among the public. Dr. Ganesan.
Yes. See, with regard to Shaiva Agama, Shaiva Siddhanta tradition, they have the 4 major divisions. They are called padas: Charya, Yoga, Kriya, and Jnana. In fact, we can say that it is an encyclopedia one, where everything is, that is philosophy, the yoga, and the Kriya and Charya. Kriya is the ritual part, and the Charya is the special type of rites, which is to be followed by a Shaiva Siddhanta follower. So most of the Agamas contain these matters, and these were, apart from the ritual, which is a major section of the Agamas, especially Shaiva Siddhanta Agamas, the philosophy portion is well developed. So from the 7th, 8th century onwards, we find independent philosophical manuals composed by many acharyas from Kashmir to give the Shaiva Siddhanta philosophy. So that was a very vigorous and much studied system of philosophy. Then there is a Shaiva Yoga also, and some Agamas contain a detailed yoga which is much different from the Patanjali Yoga. So these philosophical manuals were studied, not only though composed in Kashmir, they were studied throughout the country, and they were commented. And we have the very well-known commentary of Aghora Shivacharya of the 12th century, who has commentaries on all these Shaiva philosophical manuals. And he has also composed a detailed Paddhati called Kriya Krama Dyotika. So these Agamas were studied, and these philosophical texts, some of them were translated into Tamil, though it was not translation in the modern sense. They were given, the essence were known, and they were produced in the Tamil language.
That is what I am suggesting, is that there should be centers of studies for Agamas should be established in various places. And the training in Agama, not only in the temple activities, but also about all other parts of the Agamas, whatever has been told in Agamas, that also should be taught there. And there should be a very big renaissance. You give your concluding remark. Dr. Shankar Narayanan.
Actually, there should be 3 layers of training centers in Agamas. One should make awareness among the public about the Agamas, projecting the temple architecture, iconography, iconometry, etc., and a small introduction about the rituals, etc., to the general public to make them sure that these temples are following Agamas. This is the first layer. And in the second layer, the trainees of the Agama Patashala students should be given rigorous training, not only in the temple activities. Apart from that, the temple activities, they should be given training in Vidyapadas and Yogapadas, Charyapadas, etc. And in the third layer, the Agamic practitioners, the experts in Agamas, are to be honored, and their expertise should be recorded in videos and audios and in the texts, etc. So these 3 layers of training should be done for Agamas to promote them from fading them away.
See, even the persons who are very good expert in Agamas, they are working only in a temple. And I am very sorry to say that they are very least paid. In fact, a very good Agama Pandit, I know one who is working in a South Indian temple. He is paid only about 2,000 rupees as salary per month. And that 2,000 is due for him for the past 1 year. If such being the case, who will come and study Agamas? Agamas may not be providing you livelihood. That I clearly, we have to accept that fact. But if Agama texts are taken to the research field, that is not only for the temple activities, if it is taken for the research field, that is from universities, you can have centers, departments and other things, and they will have to go and study. They should there should be so many doctorates from that Agama text, and then it should be spread throughout the country to all the people, so that they can know about the greatness of the Agamas. Dr. Ganesan, what is your concluding remark?
Yes. First, the Agamas should be published. Since many of the Agamas are not published, there is a misconception, misinterpretation, and that is why so much confusion we find nowadays. So Agamas first should be published. For that, the manuscripts, both palm leaf and handwritten paper manuscripts, should be collected and published, edited, critically edited, not as such. So particular Agama, all the manuscripts available should be collected and should be collated, then critically edited with notes, etc. Thereby the first text is restored. Text comes out in print so that people can read, at least those who can understand Sanskrit. Then there should be both translation, the word for word translation in Tamil and other local languages, also in English. Then there's a summary of each Agama and what it contains. I can just mention, since I am working in the French Institute Puducherry, from its very foundation, they have taken up the great project of critically editing all the Shaiva Agamas for the past 60 years. So in the course of the 60 years, they have collected nearly 4,000 to 5,000 Shaiva Agama manuscripts throughout the South India, and we have published nearly 13 to 14 Shaiva Agamas critically edited with notes and summary, etc. So in that way, many more Agamas are to be published. Not only Agamas, the Paddhatis, Agama commentaries and other ritual manuals. And not only ritual, also there is the larger portion of Agama texts dealing with temple construction, iconography, etc., iconometry, then the Dhyana Shlokas. So along with the Dhyana Shloka and the iconometry, the iconographic details should be brought out. So this is another important one. Then the temple worship, and apart from that, the philosophy which I discussed earlier. So in this way, Agama can be a very well text for the Indian cultural renaissance and the spread of the knowledge. So the text should be edited and translated. That is a major work.
Yes, I agree with both of you that the Agama school of thought has got very good treasure in it, and there are so many things that will help not only to develop one individual but also to develop the entire country. And so the government also come forward to develop the school of Agamas and preserve the treasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Legacy of Agamas. You heard the 17th episode of our all-new series on traditional Indian knowledge systems, Power of Listening. The experts were Dr. G. Shankar Narayanan, HOD in Department of Sanskrit, Shri Chandrasekharendra Saraswathi Viswa Mahavidyalaya, Enathur, Kanchipuram, Dr. K.Ganesan, Professor of Indology in the prestigious French Institute, Puducherry, and the moderator of this discussion was Dr. M.A. Venkatakrishnan, retired HOD, Department of Vaishnavism, University of Madras. We hope you enjoyed it. The series has been conceptualized by Shashi Shekhar Vempati, CEO Prasar Bharati, and produced by R.Sudarsan and Vinod Kumar. Special thanks to AIR Chennai, Amol, Parth and Randheer Thakur for their contributions. This episode is also available on our official YouTube channel, Akashvani AIR. Be there on the 28th of January, same time, same frequencies. Bye for now.